What would you do if your parents drove you to a deserted bus stop, handed you $5 and sped off into the dust laughing as they left you behind? I'm Charlotte Hayes, and at 17, that's exactly what happened to me. A cruel lesson that shattered my world in the scorching August heat. 20 years later, they came back, not with apologies, but with a lawsuit to claim the life I'd bled to build. Want to know how I turned their betrayal into my triumph? Subscribe now and help us hit 1,000 subscribers. Be part of this journey. My name is Charlotte Hayes, and this is my story. I'm 37 now, standing tall in a life I built from scratch, but there's a day I'll never forget. A day that broke me and made me all at once. When I was 17, my parents drove me out to a dusty bus stop in the middle of nowhere and left me there. Not by mistake, not because they forgot, they did it on purpose, to teach me a lesson, they said. 20 years later, they came back, not out of guilt or love, but because they wanted a piece of what I'd clawed my way to create. This is the story of how I lost everything I thought I knew and found something stronger instead. It was August 2005, and I was just a skinny kid with tangled brown hair and a pair of beat-up sneakers. We lived in a crumbling little house on the edge of a small Ohio town, the kind of place where dreams went to die. My parents, Frank and Diane, ruled that house like it was their kingdom, and I was the rebel they couldn't tame. Dad was a mechanic who spent more time drinking than fixing cars, and Mom was a cashier who wore her bitterness like a second skin. They hated that I wanted more. More than the dead-end jobs, more than the yelling matches that shook the walls every night. I'd talk about college, about cities with lights that never went out, and they'd laugh, sharp and mean. "You think you're better than us, Charlotte," Dad would say, his voice thick with beer. "You'll learn your place." That summer, they told me we were driving to see my older sister, Emily, who lived an hour away in Columbus. She'd moved out years ago, and I missed her. The way she'd sneak me candy when Mom wasn't looking, the way she'd whisper that I could be anything I wanted. I hadn't seen her in months, so when they said we were going, I believed them. I threw on a faded t-shirt and my jeans, grabbed a notebook where I'd sketched little drawings of rooms I dreamed of designing someday, and climbed into the back seat of their rattling old Ford. The air was thick with heat, the kind that sticks to your skin and makes your lungs feel heavy. We drove for a while, the radio crackling with static, Mom humming off-key while Dad gripped the wheel like he was mad at it. Then they pulled over. It wasn't a gas station or a rest stop, just a lonely bus shelter on a stretch of cracked asphalt, surrounded by fields of dry grass that buzzed with cicadas. The shelter was rusted, its bench sagging under years of neglect, and a faded sign promised buses that probably never came. "Go get us some water from that vending machine over there," Mom said, pointing to a beat-up box a few yards away. Her voice was casual, like this was nothing. I didn't think twice. I hopped out, the gravel crunching under my shoes, and dug into my pocket for the crumpled $5 bill I'd earned mowing the neighbor's lawn. The machine clunked and groaned, spitting out a warm bottle of water that I clutched against my chest. I turned back, ready to climb into the car, but the car wasn't there. The spot where they'd parked was empty, just a patch of shimmering heat rising off the pavement. My heart lurched. I spun around, squinting against the sun, thinking maybe they'd pulled up the road a little to mess with me. They liked their little games, Dad especially, locking me out of the house when I talked back, hiding my shoes so I'd miss the bus to school. But the road was silent. No dust trail, no engine rumble. Just me, the water bottle slipping in my sweaty hands, and the realization sinking in like a stone. I waited. 5 minutes turned into 10, then 20. The sun climbed higher, burning my shoulders through my shirt, and my throat went dry even with the water I refused to drink. I kept telling myself they'd come back. They had to. They were my parents. Cruel sometimes, sure, but they wouldn't just leave me. Not like this. An hour passed, then 2. A pickup truck rattled by, the driver barely glancing my way, and I waved my arms, but he didn't stop. My legs shook as I sat on the bench, the metal searing my thighs through my jeans. I hugged my knees, staring at the horizon, willing that ugly Ford to reappear. It didn't. By the time the shadows stretched long and the air cooled just enough to stop choking me, I knew they weren't coming back. I was 17, alone, with $5, a warm bottle of water, and no idea what to do next. My notebook was still in the car. My stupid little sketches, my stupid little dreams. Gone, just like them. I pressed my palms to my eyes, trying to stop the tears, but they came anyway. Hot and fast, soaking into the cracked concrete below me. I don't know how long I sat there, a lost kid in a world that didn't care. But as the sky turned orange and the crickets started their chorus, something shifted inside me. I wiped my face with the back of my hand, stood up, and looked down that empty road. I wasn't going to wait anymore. I wasn't going to let them win. That day, under the blazing August sun, I didn't just lose my family. I started finding myself. I don't know how I made it through that first night. The tramsipite faded into the dark behind me as I started walking, my sneakers slapping against the asphalt, the $5 bill crumpled in my fist. I didn't have a plan, just a fuzzy memory of my Aunt Ruth, Mom's older sister, who lived in Cleveland. She was the black sheep of the family, the one who'd walked away from their small-town rules and never looked back. I'd met her a few times at awkward holiday dinners, her sharp eyes and quick laugh sticking with me. If anyone would take me in, it was her. So I walked, then hitched a ride with a quiet trucker who dropped me at a gas station near the city. By dawn, I was standing on her porch, a rickety little house with peeling paint and a screen door that creaked when I knocked. Ruth opened the door, her hair a wild mess of gray curls, a sewing needle still pinched between her fingers. She didn't ask why I was there or what I'd done to make my parents dump me like yesterday's trash. She just looked me up and down, sighed, and said, "Well, you're here now. Come in before the mosquitoes eat you alive." That was it. No lectures, no pity. She handed me a glass of iced tea, pointed to a lumpy sofa in her living room, and told me I could stay as long as I pulled my weight. I sank into that sofa, the springs groaning under me, and for the first time in hours, I breathed. Life with Ruth wasn't easy, but it was mine. She ran a small tailoring business out of her dining room, the air always thick with the hum of her sewing machine and the scent of old fabric. I started helping her, threading needles, pinning hems, sweeping up scraps. My hands clumsy at first, but steadier with every day. She didn't pay much, so I picked up shifts at a sandwich shop down the street, slapping together turkey and cheese for minimum wage. At night, I'd stumble home, feet aching, and collapse onto that sofa, now my bed, the faint smell of mildew clinging to the cushions. It wasn't glamorous, but it was something. Something I'd made, not something handed to me or taken away. Ruth saw I was hungry for more than just a roof over my head. One evening, as we sat on her porch with mugs of bitter coffee, she asked what I wanted out of life. I hesitated, then told her about the notebook I'd lost. The one full of sketches, rooms I'd dreamed up with big windows and soft colors. "I want to design things," I said, my voice small. "Houses, maybe. Places where people feel safe." She didn't laugh or tell me I was aiming too high. She just nodded, took a sip of her coffee, and said, "Then you'd better get to it, kid. Nobody's gonna do it for you." That fall, I enrolled in a community college a bus ride away. I scraped together every penny, sandwich shop tips, Ruth's odd jobs, a weekend gig folding clothes at a laundromat. I'd sit in class, my hands stained with mustard or ink, scribbling notes about architecture and color theory. It was hard. God, it was hard. Some nights I'd fall asleep at Ruth's dining table, a textbook open under my cheek, only to wake up to her nudging me with a plate of toast. But every test I passed, every project I finished, felt like a brick in a wall I was building around myself. A wall they couldn't tear down. The first real win came a year later. I'd applied for a tiny scholarship, nothing big, just enough to cover books. When the letter came, I tore it open right there in Ruth's kitchen, my hands shaking. "Accepted," it said, and I dropped to the floor, clutching that paper like it was gold. Tears hit the linoleum, not because I was sad, but because for the first time I saw a future I could touch. Ruth found me there, bawling like a baby, and she just chuckled. "You're tougher than you look, Charlotte," she said, ruffling my hair. "Keep going." She was right. I was tougher than I'd thought. Those years with her, they changed me. I graduated with an associate's degree, landed an internship at a design firm, started sketching rooms again, this time on real paper, with real purpose. I moved out of Ruth's place eventually, into a shoebox apartment that smelled like damp carpet, but it was mine. Every paycheck, every late night, every client I won over, it was all mine. I wasn't that scared girl at the bus stop anymore, waiting for someone to save her. I was saving myself. Ruth taught me more than how to thread a needle or balance a checkbook. She taught me that family isn't about blood. It's about who picks you up when you're down, who hands you a shovel and says, "Dig yourself out." She was my family, not them. Not Frank with his calloused hands and angry eyes. Not Diane with her crocodile tears and endless guilt trips. They'd left me, and I'd stopped waiting for them to come back. But I should have known the past doesn't stay buried. 2 decades later, sitting in my Chicago office with my name on the door, I thought I'd left that bus stop behind for good. I was wrong. They found me again, and this time, they weren't just driving away. They were coming for everything I'd built. I'd built a life I could stand proud of by 2025. At 37, I was Charlotte Hayes, owner of a small interior design firm in Chicago, turning empty spaces into homes for people who trusted me with their dreams. My office sat on the 10th floor of a sleek building downtown, all glass and steel, with a view of the skyline that glowed gold at sunset. I'd framed my first big contract on the wall, a boutique hotel I'd designed from scratch, and every morning I'd catch myself staring at it, still a little stunned that this was mine. I'd come a long way from Ruth's creaky sofa and that bus stop in Ohio. I thought I'd left the past behind, locked it away like a bad dream. But the past has a way of kicking down doors you thought you'd bolted shut. It started with a text from Emily, my older sister. I hadn't heard from her in years, not since I'd stopped answering her calls after she'd tried to play peacemaker one too many times. "Mom and Dad saw your interview in that design magazine," she wrote. "They've been asking about you." My stomach twisted, a sour knot I hadn't felt in decades. I'd done a small piece for a local publication, nothing major, just a profile on up-and-coming designers. I'd talked about my work, my love for creating spaces that heal. I hadn't mentioned them, not a word. But somehow they'd seen it, and now they knew where I was, what I'd become. I ignored the message, deleted it like it was nothing. But then the posts started. Mom popped up on Facebook, a profile I didn't even know she had, sharing sob stories about her ungrateful daughter who'd abandoned her family to live some fancy city life. "We gave her everything," she wrote, her words dripping with that old familiar venom, "and she turned her back on us." Dad chimed in with comments, short, jagged little stabs like, "Blood don't mean nothing to her." Strangers liked the posts, laughed praying hands and sad faces, not knowing the truth. I scrolled through it all one night, glass of wine in hand, my chest tight with something between anger and disbelief. I thought that'd be the worst of it, just words on a screen I could block and forget. Then they showed up at my office. It was a Thursday, late afternoon, the kind of day where the air smells like rain and the city hums with people heading home. I was sketching a layout for a client when my assistant, Lena, buzzed me. "There's a couple here to see you," she said, her voice hesitant. "They say they're your parents." I froze, pencil hovering over the paper, my breath catching in my throat. For a second, I was 17 again, standing in that heat, waiting for a car that never came. Then I straightened up, smoothed my blouse, and told her to send them in. They walked through the door like they owned the place. Dad's hair was thinner, gray streaking through it, but his shoulders still carried that same swagger, like he could bully the world into bending. Mom looked smaller, her face lined with years of scowling, but her eyes were sharp, darting around my office, taking in the leather chairs, the awards on the shelf. "Nice setup you got here, Charlotte," Dad said, his voice gravelly, a smirk tugging at his lip. Guess you did all right without us. I didn't smile back. What do you want? I asked, keeping my tone flat, my hands steady on the desk. Mom stepped forward, clutching her purse like a shield. We're not doing so good, honey, she said, her voice syrupy with fake softness. Your dad's back's been bad, can't work much. We lost the house last year. We figured, you're our daughter. You owe us something after all we did for you. I let out a short, dry laugh, the kind that burns your throat on the way out. Owe you? I said, leaning back in my chair. You left me at a bus stop with $5 and drove away. What exactly do I owe you for that? Dad's smirk vanished, his jaw tightening. Watch your tone, he snapped. We raised you, fed you, put a roof over your head. You think you'd be here without us? I'm here because of me, I shot back, my voice rising before I could stop it. Because I worked 3 jobs, slept on a sofa that smelled like mold, and fought for every damn thing I have. You don't get to claim this. Mom's eyes welled up. Crocodile tears, Ruth used to call them, and she dabbed at them with a tissue. We're family, Charlotte, she whispered. You can't just turn your back on us. They kept going, piling on the guilt, the threats. Dad muttered something about filial responsibility laws, said they'd sue me if I didn't help. Mom played the martyr, wailing about how hard it'd been without me. I sat there, staring at them, these strangers who'd once been my whole world. And I didn't feel small anymore. I wasn't that kid waiting for them to come back. I wasn't lost, wasn't alone. I'd built something they couldn't touch, and I wasn't going to let them tear it down. Get out, I said, standing up, my voice steady as steel. You don't belong here. Dad glared, Mom sniffled, but they left, the door clicking shut behind them. I sank back into my chair, hands trembling, adrenaline buzzing through me. Lena peeked in, her brows furrowed. You okay? She asked. I nodded, managed a weak smile. Yeah, I said, just ghosts. But they weren't done. I'd built a life from the ashes they'd left me in, and now they wanted to burn it down again. They didn't know who they were dealing with. Not the scared girl they'd abandoned, but the woman I'd become. This wasn't over, and I'd be ready when they came back. The air in my office felt heavy after they left, like the walls were holding their words hostage. I tried to shake it off, to dive back into my sketches and client calls, but Frank and Diane had planted a seed of dread I couldn't uproot. I knew them too well. They didn't slink away quietly. A week later, the letter came. It landed on my desk in a plain white envelope, delivered by a courier who didn't meet my eyes. Lena set it down with a frown, her fingers lingering like she could sense the trouble inside. I slid it open, and there it was. A legal notice from some small-time lawyer in Ohio. My parents were suing me under filial responsibility laws, claiming I owed them financial support for all the years they'd sacrificed raising me. The number they demanded was absurd, enough to gut my savings, my business, my life. I laughed, a sharp, hollow sound, and tossed the paper aside. Unbelievable. But it wasn't funny. It was war. I hired a lawyer the next day, a tough woman named Carla with a no-nonsense stare and a handshake that could crush stone. She read the notice, snorted, and said, "This is flimsy as hell, Charlotte. They've got no case, statue's shaky, and it's been 20 years. We'll fight it." I nodded, but my stomach churned. This wasn't just about money, it was about control, about dragging me back into their orbit like I'd never escaped that bus stop. I wasn't going to let them win, not after everything I'd built, so I dug in, ready for the fight. Then Emily showed up. It was a rainy Tuesday, the kind where the city turns gray and the streets hiss with tires on wet pavement. I was grabbing coffee at a diner near my office when she slid into the booth across from me, her coat dripping, her blonde hair plastered to her face. She looked older than I remembered, lines etched around her eyes, her hands fidgeting with a napkin. "Hey, Char," she said, her voice soft, almost lost in the clatter of dishes. I set my mug down, my jaw tight. "What do you want, Emily?" She flinched, then took a breath. "They're not gonna stop," she said. "Mom and Dad, they're broke, desperate. They think you're their ticket out." I leaned back, crossing my arms. "And you're here to what? Beg for them?" Her eyes dropped to the table, and she shredded the napkin into tiny pieces. "I don't know," she whispered. I wanted you to hear it from me. They came back that day, you know, at the bus stop. Maybe an hour later, they said it was a joke, a lesson to scare you straight, but you were gone and they've been blaming you ever since." I stared at her, the rain tapping the window like a drumbeat. An hour. I'd waited 2, maybe 3, baking in that heat, my hope bleeding out onto the concrete. "A joke," I repeated, my voice flat. "They left me there, Emily. No note, no call, nothing. And you're telling me they came back?" She nodded, tears brimming. "They were mad you didn't wait, said you ran off, turned your back on us. I stayed, Char. I tried to be the good one, the one who didn't fight. And it's been hell." For a moment I saw her, not the sister who'd left me behind, but a woman trapped in a cage I'd broken out of. She'd stayed with them, played by their rules, and what did she get? A life of walking on eggshells, of bending until she broke. "Why didn't you leave?" I asked, softer now. She shrugged, a small, sad gesture. "I wasn't brave like you. I still don't know how you did it." I looked away, out at the rain streaking the glass. "I had Ruth," I said, "and I had no choice." Emily reached for my hand, but I pulled back. "Help them, Char," she said, her voice cracking. "Please. They're my family too." I shook my head, slow and firm. "You chose to stay, Emily. I chose to live, not after what they did, not after what they're doing now." She left after that, her footsteps fading into the storm, and I sat there, the coffee going cold in my hands. I thought about Ruth, her steady hands, her quiet strength, and the years I'd spent clawing my way up. I'd been abandoned long before that bus stop. It was just the day I stopped pretending otherwise. Frank and Diane didn't deserve my pity, my money, my life. They'd made their choices and I'd made mine. The lawsuit dragged on for weeks, a slow bleed of paperwork and depositions. Carla was right. It was weak. They had no proof, no records, just their word against mine, and 20 years was a long time to cry neglect. The judge threw it out one crisp morning in March, the gavel banging like a door slamming shut. I walked out of the courthouse, the wind cold against my face, and felt lighter than I had in months. Carla clapped me on the shoulder, grinning. "Told you," she said. "You're free." Free. The word echoed as I drove back to the city, the skyline rising ahead of me. I'd won, but I knew them. They'd try something else, some new way to claw at me. I'd be ready. Sitting there in that diner with Emily, I'd realize something. Forgiveness doesn't mean letting them back in. It means letting go of the weight they put on you, the guilt they tried to chain you with. I wasn't their daughter anymore. Not in the way they wanted. I was Charlotte Hayes, and I'd fought too hard to let them take that away. The courthouse victory didn't erase them, but it drew a line. Frank and Diane slunk back into the shadows after the judge's ruling, their lawyer muttering apologies as they shuffled out. I didn't gloat. Didn't have the energy for it. I just drove home, the Chicago skyline stretching out before me, a quiet hum of relief settling in my bones. My office waited. My designs waited. My life waited, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe without looking over my shoulder, but I knew better than to think they were gone for good. People like them don't vanish, they fester. Still, I wasn't afraid anymore. I'd faced them and won, and that was enough for now. Spring came early that year, the city blooming with soft greens and pale pinks, the air sharp with promise. I stood in my office one afternoon, sunlight spilling through the windows, warming the hardwood floor I'd picked out myself. My latest project, a cozy lake house for a young family, lay spread across my desk. Sketches of warm wood and wide windows I'd drawn with steady hands. I traced the lines with my finger, feeling the weight of every choice that brought me here. 20 years ago, I'd been a kid with nothing but a $5 bill and a broken heart. Now, I was Charlotte Hayes, a name I'd carved into the world, a name they couldn't take away. I thought about that bus stop a lot those days, not with anger, but with a strange kind of gratitude. It was the day they'd cut me loose, the day I'd learned I didn't need them to survive. Ruth had been the first to show me that, her voice echoing in my head even now. Family's not what you're born with, kid. It's who stands by you when the world falls apart. She'd been my anchor, my compass, guiding me through those early years of scrambling and scraping by. I'd lost her 2 winters ago to a quiet illness, her hands still calloused from years of sewing when I held them one last time. But she'd left me more than a sofa or a roof. She'd left me the strength to stand on my own. Emily called once after the lawsuit, her voice thin over the line. "They're mad," she said, "but they're done, I think." I didn't say much, just listened as she rambled about their latest complaints, their latest schemes. "You don't have to stay, Em," I told her finally. "You can still walk away." She went silent, then hung up. I didn't call back. She'd made her choice just like I'd made mine. I hoped she'd find her own way out someday, but I couldn't carry her there. I'd spent too long carrying myself. The truth hit me slow, like dawn creeping over the horizon. I'd spent years thinking family was a debt you paid, a tie you couldn't cut. Frank and Diane had drilled that into me, every slap, every guilt trip, every time they'd locked me out or driven away. But they were wrong. Family isn't blood, it's trust, it's love. It's the people who see you and stay. Ruth had been that, my team at work, Lena with her quick smiles, Carla with her fierce loyalty. They were that. I'd built a family from the ground up, not out of obligation, but out of choice. And that was worth more than anything they could have given me.
I don't hate them anymore.
That surprised me most of all. The anger I'd carried for so long. It's faded, replaced by something quieter, something steadier. I don't wish them well, but I don't wish them harm either. They gave me the hardest lesson I ever learned. Sometimes, to find yourself, you have to let go of the people who made you. That bus stop wasn't the end, it was the beginning. Without it, I wouldn't be here, standing in this office, my name on the door, my hands shaping spaces where others could heal. The other day, I walked past a bus stop on my way home. Just a little shelter on a busy street, nothing special. I stopped, watched a woman climb aboard with her kid, the doors hissing shut behind them. For a second, I was 17 again, the heat pressing down, my heart pounding as that Ford disappeared. But then I blinked, and it was gone. I kept walking, my heels clicking on the pavement, the city alive around me. I wasn't that girl anymore. I wasn't waiting, wasn't lost. I was Charlotte Hayes, stronger than they'd ever know, freer than they'd ever be. This life, it's mine. Every late night, every sketch, every client who smiled at a room I'd brought to life. I built it from nothing, from the ashes they left me in, and I'll keep building. They can knock all they want, but I'm not opening the door. I've got my family now, the one I chose, the one that chose me back. And as I stand here, looking out at the skyline I've made my home, I know one thing for sure. I'm not looking back. Not now, not ever.